Okay, so I'm so inspired to tell you this story, and I chose this setting today for only one reason. It happens to be where I'm at when I was inspired to tell you this story. So it has nothing to do with the actual story. I was thinking today about train trips in China. I have had the opportunity to take trips on trains in China several different times, but this one time in particular, first of all, let me set the stage. We had started by being delayed at the airport in Denver, Colorado. Okay, way far away from China, right? Our flight is delayed in Denver, which means our flight is, well, we had to get on a different flight because we missed our flight in LA, the flight that was to take us from LA to Hong Kong, which meant, of course, we got into Hong Kong later than we had planned, which meant we missed the train that we were supposed to be on because we were delayed, which meant we were switched to another train. Okay, here's where the beauty of this story comes. We were scheduled originally, before all these delays, to be on a train that was more of the business class, faster, and of course, nicer train. As a result of the delays, we were placed on a slow, common train. Now, at the time, that did not sound good. And quite honestly, from a comfort level, it wasn't good. But from an experience level, it was gold. Because here we are. We're thrown onto this train that instead of taking 20 hours for this train trip, it was taking 48 hours. This means 2 nights of sleeping on the train. It was a crazy cool experience because this train had just average, everyday, common folks on it. These were not the elite of the culture. These were not the business class people. These were the everyday people, and we're on the train that they're on. Okay, it wasn't a nice train either. You know, we did have bunks. Hey, I'll give you that. We had the opportunity to have someplace to lay our head and sleep because we're talking 48 hours, so 2 different nights. But the experience was so rich because it was so cultural. We smelled their foods. You know, at the train stops, we would see as people gathered on the train platforms to bring food that people on the train would buy, and we got to see what are the common people buying and eating. And we would even, you know, we would get off, and some of us would even buy some of the chicken feet and different things that were totally foreign to us, right? But such a rich cultural experience. We would wake up in the mornings in particular to the sound of their music playing over these very chintzy, cheap, speakers that were probably blown and worn out, right, from decades of use or whatever. We would smell the smells, many of which were not pleasant, certainly many that were unfamiliar. We would hear them talking and so forth. And we even endeavored as best we could to communicate with some of them. I got to tell you, maybe I've already mentioned this in other videos, but the Chinese people are very hospitable. They're not afraid of us. They enjoy the interaction. They love the cultural exchange. They love the attempts at dialogue and so forth. Usually, them knowing a little bit of English. Us, you know, our Chinese was pathetic, if even that good. So, as a result, we're having these rich cultural interactions on this train, the common people's train. It was amazing. I am so glad, even as painful as it was, as exhausted as we were, getting delayed and having flight delays and then getting onto a different train and so forth, created these amazing moments of being able to talk with, connect with, and interact with people. And you know what? That's what these mission trips often are about, is these interactions with people. It's not about being in the tourist spots. It's not about being where we're comfortable. We're not there to be comfortable. We're there to certainly to share the gospel everywhere we can, and in that process have these cultural exchanges. So we're on that train for 48 hours. I'll never forget going to sleep at night. You wanted to make sure that, you know, all your critical possessions, such as your passport and stuff, were someplace where nobody could get at them while you were sleeping. You would get into your bunk. And by the way, those bunks, they were tiny. Remember, you know, it's not just cliche. Chinese people don't tend to be as large as us, but as tall or as that. So consequently, we're in these bunks and they were really tight quarters and so like you couldn't have your whole bag up there on your bunk with you, right? So you take those things that were really important and you tuck them away someplace safe. And I'll never forget, laying in that bunk and just, it was not air conditioned, right? These are common people trains, so it wasn't air conditioned. So the windows are open and you're hearing the click and the clatter and the rocking of the train. It's not going particularly fast, and sometimes in the middle of the night you'd stop somewhere. So boy, you'd want to look and see what was going on. So by all means, was not the best night's sleep, but what a wonderful, rich experience to interact with people and ride those trains. And then we got, of course, to our destination. And you know what? For that particular mission trip, once that had all occurred, everything else pretty well stayed on schedule. We arrived in the city we were going to, having had, a fairly grueling experience of travel and so forth. But we arrived even after that train experience, exhausted, hungry, but at the same time feeling like we just had the best experience of our lives in many ways. It was so cool. And then we ended up going to a very comfortable hotel and having hotel rooms and having some great meals and so forth. I have no complaints about meals most of the time in China. We ate really well and enjoyed it and so forth. But I just had to share with you the crazy dynamics that can happen on international travel. And in this case, delays are never comfortable. But in this case, it was one chain reaction after another. But it led to an experience that I would never have had any other way. And I'm very thankful for that. I encourage you, embrace the experiences of life. And sometimes they come in those hard moments, those difficult things. That may be physically difficult, maybe emotionally, maybe spiritually uncomfortable. But sometimes the best experiences, the richest memories come out of some of those times. For me, riding that common people's train in China, I never got to do that again. I rode other trains in China, but never got to do that, just common people's train again. It was a rich, deep experience for me that I'll never forget. And I'm so thankful for being able to interact with those people, experiencing their language, their music, their foods, the smells, even the rats. There were a few rats. Okay, I don't want to see it again, but hey, it was a great experience. Thanks for listening. There's just kind of a fun interaction story regarding me and China and trains. And yeah, so there you go. I'll see you on the next Catalyst Chronicles.